I always knew that woman was a walking problem. Since the day Margaret Winters moved in next door, she's been handing out crooked looks and judgments as if she were the supreme court judge of the neighborhood. She complains about the neighbor's dog, the teenager's music, the grass that, according to her, needs to be cut every 48 hours. But her favorite target? Me, Alex Parker. Our mutual hatred began over something ridiculous, the garbage can. She said that my garbage can was too close to the sidewalk, which affected the aesthetics of the neighborhood. That's right, a garbage can. As if my humble trash can was responsible for the urban collapse of the area. I ignored it, of course, and she didn't like it one bit. Since then, Margaret seemed obsessed with finding new ways to torment me. Fake complaints to the Residents Association, glares every time she saw me leaving the house. And the classic, trying to convince the other neighbors that I was a problem to be solved. Pathetic. But nothing compares to what happened on the fateful night of the blackout. My new neighbor, Elijah Washington, had moved in across the street just a month earlier. A former electrical engineer who now worked remotely as a cybersecurity consultant. Elijah quickly became known for his friendly demeanor and technical expertise. Unlike most residents who avoided Margaret at all costs, Elijah had tried to build bridges with everyone in the neighborhood. But even his legendary patience had worn thin after Margaret complained about the suspicious antennas on his roof. They were just amateur radio equipment for his hobby. That woman is something else, Elijah told me one morning as we both collected our mail. She asked if I was spying on the neighborhood with my surveillance equipment. I tried explaining it's just ham radio, but she insisted on seeing my FCC license. I laughed. Welcome to life with Margaret Winters. Just wait until she decides your mailbox is 3 inches too tall. It all started with one of her dramatic outbursts. It was late, I was coming home from work, tired, dreaming of a hot bath and a marathon of some stupid series to turn my brain off. But as soon as I entered the house, I noticed something strange. No lights were on. The microwave is off. The fridge is dead. An eerie silence has taken over the house. I checked the circuit breaker. Everything was in place. I peeked out of the window and saw that the surrounding houses were lit up. Only mine seemed to have been teleported back to the 18th century. That's when it hit me. That woman had done something. I went snorting out into the yard, ready for a war. When I noticed a curious detail, a wire ran from my electricity meter straight in her yard. Oh, how wonderful. It was a clandestine operation worthy of an energy theft B-movie. And the worst part? It was obvious that she had done it with a sick joy, just to hurt me. Maybe she was in the window right now, laughing and feeling like a criminal mastermind. I pulled out my phone to call the power company when I noticed Elijah walking his dog down the street. I waved him over. Hey, Elijah, can you come take a look at something weird? When he saw the wire, his eyes widened. Whoa, that's not just amateur hour tampering. That's a professionally done bypass. Whoever did this knows what they're doing. Margaret, I said flatly. Your neighbor? Elijah looked skeptical. You think she knows electrical engineering? I think she'd hire someone who does. She's been trying to make my life miserable since I refused to move my trash 2 inches from the curb. Elijah examined the connection more closely, using his phone's flashlight. This is dangerous work. It could cause. The universe has a peculiar sense of humor, because while we were trying to figure out how to solve this without jumping over the fence and committing a crime, we heard a loud crack. A sound that can only be described as the sound of stupidity being punished. Seconds later, everything went dark. Not just my house, the whole neighborhood. I didn't even have to look to be sure that Margaret had managed to knock out everyone's power. And that's when the fun began. In a matter of minutes, voices began to ring out in the dark. Complaints, angry shouts, security alarms going off. The neighborhood, which until then had been a peaceful middle-class bubble, turned into a pandemonium of candles being lit and cell phones illuminating angry faces. And who was at the center of the confusion? That's right, our beloved Queen of Chaos. Stay here, Elijah whispered. I'm going to check my equipment. I might be able to pinpoint exactly where the surge originated. He hurried back to his house, his technical curiosity clearly piqued. I went to the sidewalk just to enjoy the spectacle. The scene was beautiful. Neighbors coming out of their houses with flashlights, trying to understand what had happened, while Margaret tried in vain to pretend she didn't know anything. It must have been a problem with the mains, she said, her voice a little too high to sound natural. Of course. Coincidentally, at the exact moment when someone decided to play electricity technician without a degree on my meter. How convenient. I could have said something, pointed out the wire that went straight into her yard, exposed everything right then and there. But no, I prefer to wait because something told me that this story was far from over. If there's one thing that makes me lose my patience completely, it's people who think they're too smart to be caught. And Margaret, oh, that woman, not only did she steal my energy, she also managed to cause a blackout in the whole neighborhood. But like anyone who thinks they're a misunderstood genius, her first reaction wasn't to take the blame. No, she pretended she was just a concerned citizen, equally a victim of the electrical chaos. I stood there, leaning against the fence, watching the circus go up in flames. Neighbors began to gather in the street, each holding flashlights and cell phones, with expressions that ranged from irritation to sheer bewilderment. Some children started crying. Dogs barked nonstop, and in the background, I could hear an alarm going off somewhere. And in the middle of it all, there Margaret was, putting on her little show. "People, this is unacceptable," she said, trying to sound indignant. "This neighborhood pays very high taxes. And look at this, a blackout out of the blue. Where have you seen that? Oh, poor thing." If only she'd known that I'd already seen the illegal wire that ran from my meter straight into her yard. I just watched, waiting for the right moment. Meanwhile, the neighbors started making theories about what might have happened. Some thought it was a problem in the city network. Others suspected a short circuit in some house. But then, out of the blue, someone said exactly what I wanted to hear. Margaret was tinkering with her power box before the blackout. Good. Her plan to play the victim was already starting to fall apart. Margaret's reaction was instantaneous. "What? Me? I would never touch my power box. That's dangerous. What do I know about electricity?" Now, mind you, that last sentence was the first real thing she had said all evening. But people started to get suspicious, especially Mr. Thompson, a retired gentleman who lived 2 houses down from me, and who, as luck would have it, hadn't liked Margaret for a long time. He came closer and crossed his arms. "That's funny, Margaret, because I saw you in your yard messing with those weird wires near the fence." She blinked a few times, trying to swallow her panic. "Oh, that? Oh, no. I was just trying to put up some garden decorations. The lights on my balcony were flickering too much, so I went to have a look." Yes, of course, because everyone fixes balcony lights by fiddling with high-voltage cables. Just then, Elijah emerged from his house, carrying what looked like some kind of device with blinking lights. "Folks, I've got a portable power analyzer here," he announced, drawing everyone's attention. "It can detect voltage anomalies and pinpoint their origin." He moved through the crowd toward me, his device beeping more rapidly as he approached my property line. "Something's definitely wrong here," he said loudly, causing the neighbors to huddle closer. "There's an irregular power draw happening right about." He stopped at the exact spot where the wire disappeared under Margaret's fence. "Here." Margaret's face went white. Several neighbors gasped. This wasn't just my word against hers anymore. Now, there was seemingly scientific evidence backing my claims. That's just a coincidence," Margaret stammered. "I'm sure it's just detecting the normal power connections between properties." Elijah shook his head. "Ma'am, I worked for Pacific Electric for 15 years. This is not a normal reading." The icing on the cake came when the real show began. The electricity company truck arrived, and it was beautiful. The technicians descended with powerful flashlights, clipboards, and the look of someone who was used to dealing with people making a mess of things. One of them started checking the transformer in the street, while the other examined the energy clocks in the houses nearby. I made a point of approaching casually and, with the most innocent expression in the world, let loose. "I think the problem might be with my meter. There's a strange wire coming out of it and into my neighbor's yard." Silence. Margaret's eyes widened. The technicians immediately turned their flashlights on the fence. In a matter of seconds, they found what I had seen before. The illegal wire. The criminal gambit. The proof of the crime. "What the hell is that?" said one of the technicians, already writing everything down. Margaret tried to save what was already a disaster in the making. This must be a mistake. I don't even know how that wire got there. I swear I've never seen that before." Nobody believed her. The technician cut the wire with a pair of pliers and started taking measurements. It soon became obvious that her clandestine pull had been the cause of the overload that had knocked out the neighborhood's power. The neighbors, who had only been annoyed before, were now officially pissed off. "So that's it," shouted someone in the crowd. "This woman caused the blackout because she was stealing power." Oh, what a wonderful scene. Watching Margaret's face melt like wax as the neighbors' anger grew was a real work of art. But it wasn't over yet. The technicians called the police, And that's when Margaret really broke out in a cold sweat. She tried to argue, tried to say that it was a mistake, that maybe some vandal had done it just to frame her, as if some neighborhood teenager was going to wake up one day and decide to play a legal electrician in her backyard. But no one there was buying that story. What no one expected was the arrival of Detective Frank Hayes, who stepped out of the unmarked police car with the slow, deliberate movements of someone who'd seen it all before. Unlike the uniform officers, Detective Hayes wore a rumpled suit and carried a worn leather notebook rather than a standard issue pad. "Someone want to tell me why I got called away from my dinner for a neighborhood power outage?" he asked, his voice a gravelly drawl that immediately silenced the crowd. The electricity company technician quickly briefed him on the situation. As Detective Hayes surveyed the illegal wiring, his expression remained unreadable. "Ms. Winters," he finally said, turning to Margaret, "I understand you've had some complaints about your neighbors recently. Filed quite a few reports with the precinct, haven't you?" Margaret nodded eagerly. "Yes, finally. Someone who understands. I've been trying to maintain standards in this neighborhood, but some people," she shot me a venomous glance, "have been making it impossible." I felt a chill. How did Hayes know about Margaret's complaints? And why was he bringing them up now? "Interesting," Hayes said, jotting something in his notebook. "And you're saying someone planted this illegal connection to frame you?" "Exactly," Margaret exclaimed. "It had to be him." She pointed directly at me. The crowd murmured. Some neighbors looked at me with newfound suspicion. Hayes turned to me. "Mr. Parker, where were you between 6 and 8 p.m. this evening?" My stomach dropped. "I was at work. I just got home when I discovered my power was out." "Can anyone verify that?" he asked, pen poised over his notebook. Before I could answer, Elijah stepped forward. "Detective, with all due respect, I was the one who examined the connection with my equipment. This isn't amateur work. The bypass was professionally installed days ago, not hours. The power consumption records will confirm that." Hayes' eyes narrowed slightly as he studied Elijah. "And you are?" "Elijah Washington. I'm a cybersecurity consultant now. But I worked as an electrical engineer for Pacific Electric for 15 years. The detective nodded slowly, then turned to the power company technician. "You got those consumption records handy?" "Already pulling them up," the technician replied, tapping on his tablet. "Yep, just as suspected. Ms. Winters' recorded usage dropped by approximately 40% 3 weeks ago, while Mr. Parker spiked by a similar amount in the same time frame." Hayes raised an eyebrow at Margaret. 3 weeks is a long time for a frame job, Ms. Winters. And while the police arrived and started asking questions, I just stood there with my arms folded, watching everything like someone enjoying a good live show. Because honestly, after everything that Margaret had done to turn my life into a living hell, finally seeing her go down was the most satisfying thing in the world. But little did I know that her revenge wasn't over yet, and that she still had one more dirty trick up her sleeve. If there was one thing I already knew about this woman, it was that she would never, ever admit she was wrong. She could be caught red-handed with all the evidence thrown in her face and still find a way to play the victim. And that's exactly what happened. The police were there. The technicians from the electricity company had dismantled the criminal gambit, and the neighbors were furious. Anyone with an ounce of common sense would have put their head down and tried to reduce the damage. But no, she decided to double down. "This is a conspiracy against me," she shouted, with that face of fake indignation that only a truly shameless person can pull off. I almost laughed, but what came next was even better. "This is a frame-up. I would never steal energy. This was planted here to incriminate me." "Oh yes, of course. Because everyone in the neighborhood got together to come up with an ingenious plan to install clandestine wires in her yard, just to pin the blame on her. The neighbors, who until then had only been indignant, now began to openly mock her. I heard one of the neighborhood teenagers whispering to a friend, "Was it the CIA?" But the icing on the cake was when Detective Hayes, already fed up, turned to her and asked, "Can you explain to me why we found irregular consumption records on your electricity bill?" Silence. Her gaze wavered for a second. That must be a mistake. I was going to call and complain. I was just trying to understand why my bill was so high. Hayes looked at the technician. The technician looked at Hayes, and the two of them exchanged that classic, "she thinks we were born yesterday" look. She still tried to argue, tried to say that someone very evil must have done it just to hurt her, but no one else was listening. Hayes just sighed and began to write down the details of the case, while the power company technician finished dismantling the workaround. And then came the best part. The fine. Margaret was standing there, trying to keep her pride up, when the technician approached her and handed her a piece of paper. Here is the official notification. In addition to the fine for the irregular use of energy, you will also be responsible for the cost of the repair and the inspection we're going to carry out to ensure that no one else is illegally tampering with the network. Her expression changed instantly. A fine? But it's none of my business. You can challenge it in court if you like, but the consumption records and physical evidence are already documented. She clutched the paper as if she had been summoned to hell. But I already knew it wouldn't end there, because if there was one thing that Margaret didn't know how to do, it was accept defeat. The next day, as I was getting ready for work, my doorbell rang. When I opened it, Detective Hayes stood there, looking even more rumpled than the night before. "Mr. Parker, I need a few more minutes of your time." I invited him in, offering coffee, which he gladly accepted. "Something strange came up in our investigation," he said, not touching his coffee. "MS. Winters filed a police report 3 weeks ago, claiming someone was tampering with her electricity meter." I nearly choked on my coffee. "What? That's when the theft started." "Exactly," Hayes said, studying my reaction carefully. "She specifically named you in her report." "That's ridiculous. She was setting me up from the beginning." Hayes nodded slowly. "Probably. But here's where it gets interesting. We looked into Ms. Winters' background. She's done this before." "Done what?" I asked, confused. "In her previous neighborhood, 3 different neighbors reported power theft. Each time, she filed preemptive complaints against them before they discovered the theft. So, she's a serial power thief?" I couldn't believe what I was hearing. More than that, she's currently on probation for harassment and fraud in Riverside County. She wasn't supposed to leave the jurisdiction, but she moved here and changed her name. Her real name is Margaret Wilson. I sat back, stunned. "Why are you telling me this?" Hayes' expression darkened. "Because she's dangerous, Mr. Parker. More dangerous than you realize. After we left last night, she filed a restraining order against you, claiming you've been stalking and threatening her." "What? That's absurd." "I know," Hayes said calmly. "But until we sort this out, I need you to be extremely careful. Document everything. Don't engage with her. And consider installing security cameras." After Hayes left, I sat in my kitchen, my coffee cold, trying to process this new information. Margaret wasn't just an annoying neighbor. She was a calculating criminal with a history of targeting people. And now she had set her sights on me. The next day, the neighborhood was a little quieter. I mean, as calm as a place can be after a blackout caused by a clueless neighbor. But I knew the peace wouldn't last long, and it didn't take long for my prediction to come true. In the morning, while I was having my coffee, I saw a strange movement in the street. Margaret was talking to a small group of neighbors, those who were easy to manipulate, the kind who are moved by any dramatic story. She spoke with exaggerated gestures, her voice trembling, making faces and mouths as if she had been the victim of the greatest coup in history. I went out onto the balcony just to hear what she was up to now. "This has all been a huge injustice," she cried. "I've been accused of something I didn't do. Now they want to make me pay an absurd fine, and all because some people in the neighborhood have a personal problem with me. Oops. Now I've become some people. Interesting." Standing slightly apart from the group, but clearly listening, was a young woman I hadn't seen before. She was taking notes on a small pad, occasionally nodding as Margaret spoke. "A reporter? Just what we needed." Margaret playing to the media. I could have let it go. I could have ignored it and got on with my day, but I didn't. Because if there's one thing that annoys me more than people screwing up, it's people trying to play the victim after being caught red-handed. So I just smiled and walked down the porch steps to where she was standing. "Good morning, Margaret. Have you told them about the clandestine wire running from your yard to my light meter?" Absolute silence. The neighbors who were listening to her tearful version looked at me, then at her. She blinked rapidly, as if processing the fact that I was there to put an end to the theatrics. "This was a setup," she insisted, her voice a little thinner. "Someone must have done it while I was distracted." I crossed my arms. "For weeks?" "Because the electricity company confirmed that the power theft started a long time ago." "I guess you must be the most absent-minded person in the world then." She opened her mouth to retort, but nothing came out. The neighbors began to disperse, realizing that they were wasting their time with this circus. The young woman with the notepad approached me. "Mr. Parker? I'm Vanessa Kim from the West Side Chronicle. I'd love to get your side of this story." I hesitated, remembering Detective Hayes' warning. "I don't think that's a good idea right now. There's an ongoing investigation." Ms. Kim smiled understandingly. "Of course. But just so you know, Ms. Winters has already given us quite a detailed interview. including some concerning allegations about you. My stomach dropped. What allegations? She claims you've been harassing her since she moved in, including tampering with her mail and trespassing on her property at night. And then, when Margaret realized that she had lost the small audience she was trying to win over, the mask fell for good. She glared at me with pure hatred, as if swearing silent revenge. And it was at that moment that I realized she wasn't going to give up. This story wasn't over yet. At home, I immediately called Detective Hayes to inform him about the reporter. He sighed heavily. I was afraid of this. MS. Kim called the station this morning asking for comments on what she called a pattern of police bias in favor of certain residents. Ms. Winters is playing the discrimination card. What should I do? I asked. For now, nothing. Let us handle the legal side. But I'd accelerate that security camera installation if I were you. That afternoon, Elijah helped me set up a comprehensive security system around my property. As we worked, he shared his own concerns. I did some digging, he said, connecting wires to motion sensor. You're Margaret Winters, or Wilson, or whatever her real name is. She's not just a garden variety con artist. In her last neighborhood, a homeowner who confronted her about similar issues had his house mysteriously catch fire. I paused, screwdriver in hand. You think she's capable of arson? Elijah shrugged. I think someone who's willing to mess with high-voltage electricity to frame a neighbor isn't someone who respects boundaries of any kind. If I thought that woman was going to accept defeat and get on with her life, I was sorely mistaken. After being publicly unmasked, having to deal with an astronomical fine, and completely losing credibility with her neighbors, any normal person would have put their tail between their legs and kept quiet. But Margaret? Oh no. Margaret decided that in some completely twisted way, I was the villain of the story. And that's how phase 2 of the war began. Her pathetic attempt to turn me into the enemy of the neighborhood. The day after her little theater fiasco, the bombardment began. Anonymous letters, but honestly, with Margaret's stamp on them, appeared in some neighbors' mailboxes. They all basically said the same thing. Beware of certain residents in the neighborhood. Some people here are creating a toxic environment, spreading lies and playing neighbor against neighbor. The real problem in this neighborhood is not those who have been wrongly accused, but those who spread hatred. Let's unite against gossip. Oh, how cute. A desperate attempt to look like the victim and at the same time paint me as the real problem in the neighborhood. And you know what the best part was? No one, absolutely no one, fell for it. The letters ended up in the trash faster than she could fold the paper. The neighbors had already seen the whole scene on the night of the blackout. They saw the clandestine wire. They saw the gambit dismantled, and they saw her exposed as the fraudster she was. A melodramatic letter couldn't erase what everyone had seen with their own eyes. But she didn't stop there. As the smear campaign didn't stick, she decided to try a new attack, denouncing me. First, she called the city hall, claiming that my house was not up to the standards of the neighborhood. The inspector who came to check took a quick look, laughed, and left. Then she tried to claim that my yard was full of debris and hazardous waste, which was hilarious considering that her yard was more like a junkyard disguised as a garden. The result? Another pointless visit from the inspectorate, who found absolutely nothing. But the best part came when she tried to report me to the police. Yes, you read that right. She called the police station saying that I had sabotaged the power to her house in order to incriminate her. That was the final stroke of insanity. When the police showed up to investigate the complaint, I was laughing before I even opened the door. The officers were the same ones who had come on the day of the blackout. The same ones who had seen the illegal wire and documented everything. One of the officers crossed his arms and let out a tired sigh. Did she really report you? It seems so, I replied. Try to hold back my laughter. The other policeman shook his head. Of course, she doesn't know that we have everything recorded in the report. And then something beautiful happened. The policeman went to her house, and in less than 5 minutes, they came out again, looking like they just heard the biggest joke of the day. Relax, one of them said before leaving. She could only feel more ashamed. That was it. The last shot in the foot. Not only had she failed to incriminate me, she now had a note in the system for false reporting. 2 days later, Vanessa Kim's article appeared in the West Side Chronicle. To my surprise, it wasn't the hit piece I'd feared. The headline read, Neighborhood Power Struggle, the woman behind a pattern of harassment. The article detailed not only Margaret's electricity theft, but also uncovered her history in previous neighborhoods. It quoted Detective Hayes, confirming her probation violations, and included statements from former neighbors about similar incidents. The reporter had done her homework. The article concluded with a statement from the power company estimating that Margaret's theft had cost me over $800 in 3 weeks, and that similar thefts across the county cost honest customers millions every year. Margaret's response was immediate and unhinged. She stormed out of her house, clutching the newspaper, marched directly to mine, and began screaming on my front lawn. "You did this. You turned that reporter against me. This is slander. I'll sue all of you." Neighbors emerged from their homes, watching the spectacle. Some were filming on their phones. Elijah appeared beside me on my porch, arms crossed. "Ms. Winters, I'd strongly advise you to leave Mr. Parker's property now," he called out. "You're being recorded from multiple angles, and you're currently violating the terms of your probation." "Shut up," she screamed, her face contorted with rage. "You're all in on it together." Just then, Detective Hayes' unmarked car pulled up. He stepped out, looking genuinely angry for the first time. "Ms. Winters," he called sharply, "step away from that house immediately." And then, well, that was the beginning of the end for her. After this whole debacle, Margaret's reputation was officially ruined. No one paid any attention to her complaints anymore. The Residents' Association meetings, which she had previously dominated like an authoritarian regime, were now filled with impatient looks and people rolling their eyes whenever she tried to say something. The neighbors began to ignore her completely. Some people even made a point of stepping off the sidewalk when they saw her coming, as if avoiding eye contact was enough to stop her level of insanity from contaminating the air around them. But the final blow came when rumors began to circulate that she would have to sell her house. The fine imposed by the electricity company was no joke. On top of that, she had to pay for the cost of repairing the wiring in the neighborhood, and she was also being sued for energy fraud. And of course, when the technicians investigated her electrical gambit, they discovered other irregularities in the house, which only added to the costs. Then, one day, I went out to get my newspaper and saw a moving truck stopped in front of her house. There was Margaret packing her belongings and organizing boxes with the expression of someone who has finally accepted defeat. Oh, what a spectacular sight. And because I'm a generous man, I decided to say one last goodbye. I walked calmly to her sidewalk, and with the most fake, debauched smile I could manage, I said, "You'll be missed, you know. The neighborhood will never be the same without you." She gave me a look of pure hatred. "Fuck you." I just shrugged. "No thanks, but enjoy your new neighborhood. I'm sure they'll appreciate your electrical expertise." As I turned to leave, Elijah approached, holding a small envelope. "What's that?" I asked. "A parting gift from the neighbors," he said with a grin, handing it to Margaret. We took up a collection. Margaret tore open the envelope suspiciously. Inside was a gift card to a local hardware store with a note that read, "For purchasing your own power supplies. Sincerely, the Neighborhood Watch." Her face turned a shade of purple I'd never seen on a human being before. Without another word, she stomped back into her house, slamming the door so hard a wreath fell off. 2 weeks later, a young couple moved into Margaret's old house. They were friendly, respectful, and, as I learned during their housewarming party, completely shocked at the strange wiring modifications they discovered during renovations. The electrician said he'd never seen anything like it. The husband told me over beers in their backyard. It was like someone had set up a command center to control power to the entire block. I just smiled and raised my bottle in a toast. To new neighbors and regulated electricity. Sometimes in life, you get exactly the karma you deserve. Margaret thought she could steal my power, but in the end, she was the one who got unplugged.